Hey there. Hey everyone. Winifred here, magical maven of Tree. Just jumping on Facebook to do a live stream. This is going to be the first in a series of 5 live streams that I'll be doing where I'm going to be discussing and empowering you to connect with your inner witch. So this series is called Connecting to Your Inner Witch. And this is a 5-part mini series I'll be putting up here on live streaming on Facebook. My name is Winifred. I'm the magical maven of Tree, and I'm just going to do a quick check, make sure everyone can see and hear me okay. So just bear with me while I just check my phone and make sure everything's working okay tech-wise. It seems to be. Just double checking through my phone. I'm just going to assume it is working okay. So if you are joining me here live, definitely give me a shout out. Let me know that you're here. Type something in the comment area. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have any questions on what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to be on for about 30 minutes and we're going to be talking about connecting to your inner witch. And today in our first episode, we're going to be talking about what does it mean actually to be a witch? What does that word witch mean? It's a pretty loaded word. It's a pretty famous word where it gets a lot of it causes a lot of reactive and emotional energy. So we're going to start this series by actually talking about the word witch and what it means. This is obviously going to be from my perspective. So what I feel and what I think about the word witch, and also about what does it mean to be a witch in a modern sense. And also we're going to be talking about other terms that might feel like a better fit or might feel like a more comfortable fit for some folks that align with a lot of the spiritual principles of what it means to be a witch, but maybe are not as comfortable or for different reasons might not want to use the word witch, and they might want to align with the different terminology. So we're going to be kind of unpacking a little bit and all about those kinds of things. So if you're joining me live, it's great to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me chat about things I'm passionate about. And if you are catching this on the replay, I appreciate you for taking the time to watch it as well. So again, my name is Winifred. I'm the magical maven of Tree. If you are joining me live, give me a shout out. Let me know you're here. I'm trying to check on my phone to see if it's the tech stuff's working okay. It looks I'm not 100% sure, so we're just gonna go with it because this is recording and I can put up the recording later. So I'm just gonna stay on track. If you're here, give me a shout out. Let me know you're here. Yeah, and let's get right into it. So my name is Winifred. I am the founder and owner of Tree, which is a pagan witch shop located in Western Mass. We have a brick and mortar location. I'm also the founder and facilitator of an online magical community called the Witching Well. And I have been practicing pagan slash solitary witch pretty much my entire life. So I came to these traditions as a teenager. So I've been doing this work. It's really my lifelong identity. I always tell people a little bit about my story was that I was raised in an interesting household that was in many ways very conservative. But when it came to spirituality, it was actually really progressive and very unusual for the time period in which I grew up. So I have kind of an interesting mix in my background. So in some senses, my upbringing had a lot of conservative elements, but from a spiritual perspective or religious perspective, it actually had a very progressive approach. And I was not raised in a church. So the phrase is unchurched. So I was raised unchurched, which means that well, if you ask my parents, they would say they identified as Christians. However, we were secular and we didn't attend a church. We didn't attend church. I didn't step foot in a church till I went to someone's wedding when I was almost an adult. So that's a little bit about me. I was drawn to these practices because I've always been what might be described as like a spooky child. I was always very aware of that there was more to the world than meets the eye. So I'm not even sure how I was aware of witches at an early age, but I was aware that there were witches and that they were herbalists and that they were very connected to the earth. I'm not really sure I don't know how that idea got in my head because it was in my head by the time I was a small like I was in elementary school and I wanted to be a witch by like fourth grade. So it's something that's just been really innately part of my life. I know that's not the same for everyone's journey, but that's a little bit about my journey. But we're here today to talk about like what does it mean to be a witch? What does that mean? That word is it's a very intense word. It's a very powerful word. It has a very ancient lineage. It's rooted in old ways, and it's also very powerful in a modern sense. Um, so there's lots of terms out there, and I think one of the cool things about as things are there's like a real revival, a lot of curiosity, a lot of growing acceptance about what it means to practice witchcraft and to identify as a witch, which is very exciting. But I think it's starting to be there's more terminology being used, and that can be very confusing. So people don't. There's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding. Like, what does it really mean to be a witch? So a lot of this will be from like obviously my personal gnosis and my personal experience, because that's obviously the best filter each of us has is like when information comes through ourselves. Obviously we see the world through our own eyes. So for me, being a witch is very much and foremost about being a healer. It's about being connected to the earth, being very aware and connected to the seasonal tides, like the turning of the year, which in paganism, modern paganism or neo-paganism is called like the wheel of the year. But for me, my personal practice is very connected to honoring the earth as sacred, being very connected to the changing seasons, that the cycle of the year is a wheel that's ever, flowing. It's has its time of awakening and growth and life, and then letting go and dying, like what we see in autumn, and then going into a feral or a sleeping or like a dormant time period, like that we see during winter if you live in an area that has all the seasons. I am also very connected to things like around the cycles of the moon, the energies of the moon. And so for me, being a witch is a lot about healing and green energy and connecting to the earth as sacred, and taking a lot of personal responsibility and being in charge of my own spiritual agency. So that's kind of a big phrase, spiritual agency. What is that? What does that mean? That's about tapping into and connecting to your own spiritual authenticity. So to be a witch is about there isn't one overarching authority. So it's very much your own. It's a spiritual practice, and I liken it a lot to yoga. So the craft, being a witch, practicing witchcraft is a practice. It's a craft. It's an art. So very much like in yoga is a practice. It's a way of life. So being a witch is very much a way of life. It's about showing up, being present, and being part of being in your spiritual practice in an everyday way. So let's talk about a little bit about the word. So witch is a very loaded word. It has if we really look at it I'm not going to go way into the etymology of the word, but there are, different thoughts about the actual origins of the word. But pagan is another common word that is used. Pagans originally meant like country dweller, and the reason the reason that people who practice these earth-centered traditions are often called pagans or use that word is because those who still lived in the more remote areas and in the country in older times maintained their spiritual practices. So they maintained these earth-centered spiritual traditions, and so they got labeled as pagan. That's just a loose sense of how we got here with the word pagan. So you may see that people identify as a witch. They may say they're pagan. They may use the word Wicca or Wiccan. And these words are evolving and changing over time. It meant sort of one kind of thing like 20 years ago, and now in current times it means something a little different. Wicca and Wiccan is a recognized religion. But not everyone who's a witch is necessarily Wiccan. Not everyone who's pagan would necessarily say they're a witch. The best thing is to ask if you meet somebody who practices an earth-centered spiritual tradition, what words do they use, and what does that mean to them? And I would ask them because the really wonderful thing about these practices is that there is no one right way to do it. There's no one way to do it. There are formal traditions out there that one could connect with and train within, but there is no one way. There isn't just one way to be a witch. There's many ways to be a pagan or a witch or Wiccan. So that's something that's very beautiful. Just could check my notes, make sure I don't leave anything out for today. So some terms that you're going to see are here. You might hear about that people identify as pagan. They might be Wiccan. They may identify as a witch. They may say that they're solitary. They may say they're a traditional witch. They may say that they're eclectic. What are the words? There's other words too. There's other terminologies where you might hear things like heathen. You might hear a Celtic witch. You might hear that someone's a druid. So if we really break it down, some of these traditions would identify also as coming under the umbrella of being a pagan, but some of them would not. They would just say they're just what they are. So I know those are a lot of terms, but I just want to kind of get some out there so you can kind of start getting a little familiar with them. So we have things like might say you're pagan, which means that you connect to an earth-centered spiritual practice of some sort, honoring the earth is sacred and the wheel of the year. You might identify as a witch. So as a witch, you might be, there's lots of ways to be a witch. So you might be a green witch, which would be like someone who's very into the earth and healing herbs. You might be more of a spell witch, like really into doing magical spells. You might be a healer. You might be psychic. There's lots of different ways to be a witch. You might just use the word witch because you might be an integrative idea or like an eclectic, like a tapping into more than one aspect. So you might do healing work. You might work with herbs. You might be psychic. You might be all those things. So then, which is more how I align. So I just use the word witch. It's just simpler. So these are some ways you might see these terms used. Wicca and Wiccan, about 20 years ago, kind of was the same thing as saying you're a witch. Now it means that you align typically, and like I said, you got to ask each person how they're using their term and what it means for them. That would be the most respectful thing to do. But a lot of times people who identify as Wicca or Wiccan are practicing a certain set of aspects in a tradition. You also will see things like traditional witches that maybe have formal training, and there are different traditions that someone might get formal training in. So that would be like Gardnerian or Alexandrian. I'm not going to go way into those. That's a whole class all on its own. But again, the reason I'm sharing all these terminologies is not to overwhelm you, but to understand that there's many ways that one might come to the craft and practice it. And so the best thing is to ask someone that you meet what it means for them. And for you, if you're exploring these ideas and trying to connect your own inner witch and how you identify, the best thing to do is to start doing some research, start reading some books. If you are in an area, sometimes there are open gatherings. So if you're in an area where there's an open gatherings that the public can attend, like there's a whole movement called the Pagan Pride Days. They all happen, most of them in the fall. You might find a local Pagan Pride Day that you can go to where you can meet folks and get learning on these different practices, because each one has like a slightly different flavor. It's kind of like it's all soup, but they're flavored differently. And so you have to find which one really resonates with you. So you might go to like a Pagan Pride Day. You might see if there's like an open event. Reading books is really great. You might join some online forums and just kind of get into some conversations. I always think it's best to do your research first and take your time and go slowly and really get to know anyone that you're connecting with, obviously for safety reasons, but also too to make sure that their values and their core energies align with your ethics and values. That's very important, obviously. So we've talked about these terms, and there are a lot, and it can feel overwhelming to wade through initially. So something that can be really valuable is to really think about the common threads. So some common threads running through all of these traditions, at least from my opinion, my experience, is that they all have a similarities in the sense that they all typically honor the earth as sacred. They're earth oriented or earth centered practices. Another common thread between all these traditions is that they practice something we call direct encounter practices or direct encounter spiritual practices. So what does that mean? That means that these traditions come alive, and when you are practice, it's a practice, and the practices really encourage some sort of direct relationship or direct encounter with the sacred, with source, with divinity. If you are into connecting with some sense of divinity, um, and the idea and like oneness. Think about like that we are all one. We are all connected. So they're direct encounter spiritual practices, and that means that they are. So they really encourage a direct contact. Now that you might hear so that could be like attending a ritual, that could be doing a tarot reading, that could be going into the garden if you're a green witch, and having a relationship with the plants that you're growing in your garden and speaking with them and tending to them and then making medicine with them. And through every step of the process, you are connecting with the life of the plant, you're honoring the plant, you're helping, you're growing it, you're tending to the garden, you're connecting with the spirit of the plant and asking if it's appropriate for you to work with it to ultimately either nourish your body for food resources or to make medicine if you were like an herbalist, to use the plant's leaves or roots or stems or flowers to make an herbal remedy. So that just gives you a sense of like what it means to be a direct encounter. So it's encouraged for you to have a direct experience, direct encounter. Sometimes you'll see something we call ecstatic dance. That's like dance where where the idea is that you're really like seeking to connect, to reach out through the vehicle of dance, almost like a trance state, to come into oneness, to come into alignment with yourself and the the universe, the world, like that oneness around you. So like you might see ecstatic dances, you might see people going to a ritual, they might be going to a drumming, they might be doing divination or like oracle tarot readings, they might be doing something called stream of consciousness writing if they're journaling. These are all they're direct encounter practices. They're about having a direct relationship with the universe, powers that be, sacred source, something greater than yourself. So that's a little bit of a sense of what it means to have a direct encounter practice. It means that there isn't like someone between you and connecting. So it's you and direct communication, direct contact, direct communion is usually the word we would use. There isn't an individual but standing between you and that experience, by and large. So that's like something that's a common thread, I think, through all these spiritual practices. So for people who are seeking to kind of sort out, like, how would I even know where to begin? What word would I work with? So anyway, so that gives you a little bit of a sense. They also, I think that something very powerful about the craft and the witchcraft is it has a lot about personal responsibility, personal accountability. It is a lot about self-development, self-growth, spiritual awakening, and really like going inward to go outward. You'll see a lot in what it like in the beginning of learning your craft about meditation, stillness, centering, groundedness. You'll see a lot about being centered, still, grounded, meditating, because we want to be developing these inner gifts so that we can be able to make contact, like either like deeper with ourselves or with the greater sense of the universe or the oneness around us. So anyway, so my name's Winifred. I'm the magical maven of Tree, which is a brick and mortar pagan witch shop located in Western Massachusetts. I'm also the founder and facilitator of the Witching Well, which is an online magical community. It is a collective of witches and pagans and earth-centered spiritual folk, where we come together inside the membership, and I offer spiritual coaching, magical coaching, monthly teachings where we have online classes and workbooks, and we focus on different topics to help you connect more with your inner witch and empower you on your spiritual journey. The Witching Well is not any one tradition. We're more of a collective, but seeking to empower you to find your spiritual path as a person, an earth-centered or magical person, in a way that's most relevant for you. So I provide skills and tools for you to add to your spiritual toolbox, and you decide how they best fit in your life. Or maybe some of them don't fit at all, and you just learn about it and set it aside. And the ones that work really well for you, you keep and you add to your personal toolbox. So anyway, so I appreciate you for letting me come on here and chat a little bit. I'm going to be running a 5-part series all about connecting to your inner witch. And so today we are talking about, like, what does it mean to be a witch? Like, what is that term? There's a lot of terms out there, and it can get overwhelming really quickly. So I want to leave you with a last thought, or some final thoughts or advice. My advice to you, or suggestion, if you're looking to get a little more understanding on these practices, is I'd get a book. There's a really great book by Amber Kay called How to Become a Witch. That's a great resource. I also really like her book True Magic is another great book. Christopher Penczak has a wonderful book. The Inner Temple of Witchcraft is a wonderful book. If you're looking to kind of understand a little bit more about, like, what does it mean to identify or align with the word witch, or to be interested, curious, or to want to learn about the craft, or what does it mean to be pagan, Wiccan, an earth-centered spiritual practitioner. So those are some great books that can help you get like digging into your journey and getting some education around it. You could also seek out if there are any events happening in your area where you can meet other pagans and witches and Wiccan folk, and get to kind of get some education and see what they're all about and get to know them a little more. There's a whole movement called the Pagan Pride Day movement, and they host there's many Pagan Pride Day events. They happen typically in autumn, like we're coming into the Pagan Pride Day season. There's Western Mass Pagan Pride Day is happening on Saturday, September 7th in our local area, but there's like stuff in Eastern Mass. There's stuff all over the country in the US if you're a United States person. But you can go to a Pagan Pride Day, and there you'll be able to experience, like, usually there's a ritual, there's lots of community, there's free education and workshops. So that's a really great way to get a little more experience and to start meeting people in your community. And I also run an online magical community that it provides an opportunity for you to explore and grow and discover and grow your skills in this practice as well. So anyway, so that is our wrap up. We've been talking about what it means to be a witch. We've gone over some of the terms today. You can go back through the recording of this will go out, and you can rewatch it. So you can take some notes. There's a complimentary workbook that goes with this series. I definitely recommend you download that. I'll put that in the first comment, one of the comments in this conversation, so you can get access to that workbook. You can rewatch this video and take some notes on it. And if you have a question about anything we've talked about today, shoot me an email or Facebook message me. I'd love to hear from you, or throw the question in the comments and I'll check back on them later. But anyway, my name is Winifred. I'm the Magical Maven of Owentry, a brick and mortar shop located in Western Mass. I'm also the founder and facilitator of the Witching Well, which is an online magical community. And thank you for listening to me. I appreciate you letting me come into the corner of your world, and I look forward to chatting with you tomorrow. Is the second in our series, and I look forward to talking with you about all witchy goodness. All right, have a blessed and bright day. Take care.